injury list continues to pile up for Carlo Ancelotti and company. Some big names missing, and some big names missing, Sid, at a critical time. If you look ahead to Real Madrid's schedule, especially in the league coming up, this is not a good time for Carlo Ancelotti and company to be dealing with all these injuries, is it?
No, I mean, Real Madrid, obviously, every team in Spain has a really packed fixture list at this stage of the season, because they compress the whole of the Copa del Rey into the first weeks into the whole of January and the first couple of weeks of February as well. And so you get that intensity of games for everybody in Spain. But of course, when you've got a team like Real Madrid, who then are going on into the Champions League as well, it just continues. It runs right into those meetings with Liverpool in the Champions League. They've, of course, on top of that, you've got to add two other elements. One is the fact they've just come back from Saudi Arabia in the Super Cup and the two games that they played there. They've got to go and play the Club World Cup as well, which will be at least one game, could be two. So it becomes very, very compressed for them. And of course, this is off the back of the World Cup, where I think I'm right in saying I think they had 13 players, maybe 14 players at the World Cup. Now, not all of them playing starring roles, and of course one or two who didn't go, like Toni Kroos, and in the end Karim Benzema went and came back. But I think that's a lot of that's a lot of games for those players. It's a big concern for Ancelotti, not least of course because you look at the way they've played since they came back from the World Cup, and they haven't been particularly good at all.
Sid, we're talking about injuries and fatigue. Those are obviously real. Is there anything else you can put your finger on as to why Real Madrid have been struggling so much of late after what was a great start to the season?
It was a good start to the season, although it's also true, I think, in some of those games that we weren't always entirely convinced by them. But this is also one of the reasons, by the way, why I think there's a risk of getting too carried away now. You look back on Real Madrid at this stage last season, and they weren't particularly good in January either. There was a period of the season last year where we watched them and we thought, they're not right. They're not playing particularly well. And then by the end of the season, of course, they've won the European Cup, they've won La Liga. They won La Liga really quite comfortably in the end, even if we weren't always impressed. Even if you can look back at the European Cup campaign and you know, analytically at least, you can say, well, we still don't really know how they did it. We don't know how they got through PSG. We don't know how they got through City. We don't know how they got through Chelsea. But in La Liga, at least, they were comfortably, by the end of the season, the best team in it. So I think it would be unwise to look at this now and think there's something really badly wrong. And we're listening to people the other day in Spain asking Ancelotti if this was the end of an era. And obviously, look, you can look at the age of some of the players and you can sort of justify that kind of analysis. But I think it does go over the top. And the amount of times we've been in this position before in the last 4 or 5 years where you get a week in which, let's say, for argument's sake, Real Madrid play someone really big on the Saturday, then they play someone pretty big in midweek, then they play someone really big on the Saturday again, and then they've got a big Champions League game the next day. You know, 4 games. Wow, by the end of next week, their season could be over. And what tends to happen? They win the first one, they win the second one, they win the third one, they win the fourth one, and instead of the season being over, by the end of that period in which we think, God, this could be really terrible for Real Madrid, it turns out to be really good.
I had a flashback when he said end of an era. I feel like we've done this segment at this time of year each of the last 2-3 seasons.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Barcelona.
No, I mean,
because
Real Madrid always has...
I'm not going to put any boys in it that are not here.
Right.
But there was some people who, through the end of an era, are a little bit too quickly with Barcelona, and then they went on to win quite a few trophies.
Well, with Real Madrid, it seems like there's always a point in the season where they don't convince, as he says. They don't impress. They always seem to claw their way out of it. You see that happening again this season?
Well, I'm not convinced, no.
But you weren't convinced last year, were you?
Yeah, but Barcelona were poorer last year.
Okay, all right.
They've made some steps. They've got one of the best strikers in. We saw the performance of Pedri and Gavi again. They've bolstered the squad. They did all those financial levers in the summer, all that nonsense. So they've made a step. The question now is, can Real Madrid pick up and go up another gear? I'm not sure they can.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.